I'm Megan Lee.
And I'm Nicole Danielle.
And this is Romance on the Rocks. We're two bookish biddies imbibe and enjoy romance novels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're continuing the holiday festivities.
Mm-hmm.
We are in person together. We just finished a Thanksgiving meal, but this is our second Christmas episode. We like to record ahead of time, but we have a bevy of Christmas stories that are a delight and a Christmas treat.
A bevy and a bevy.
A bevy.
What are you drinking?
I am drinking a lovely concoction of bourbon from one of my favorite distilleries in Kentucky, Bluegrass Distillers. So some lovely bourbon with Cheerwine, because I'm embracing my North Carolina lifestyle now, and Cheerwine is where it's at. And I have this lovely emotional support beverage cup that our dear friend Marie gave to me as a present. So
yeah, she's lovely.
I love Marie.
Do too. Yep. I am drinking I'm not even sure what to call it. It started out as a crock pot apple cider mulled wine hot sangria.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided to chill it out a little bit. So now it is on ice, but still very holiday themed. And I thought it was appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you're not familiar with Cheerwine, it is neither wine or cheer, although it makes you cheerful.
It's cheer.
It is cheer. I equate it to a Shirley Temple in a can, essentially.
Yeah.
So for today's podcast, Megan, do you have any trigger warnings or adult content or anything that we should know for our audience ahead of time?
I think that about 50 to 70% of the books we read probably have adult content. So there's my trigger warning. Nothing really beyond that. It's my favorite book, you guys, of our entire podcasting career, which is
short.
Illustrious. Don't listen to this woman. I really liked this book.
I have some almost mild assault, and can we call assault
your trigger warning
or my trigger warning?
I think you can. I think you can, because I do feel like there are very different levels of discomfort and threat.
Yes.
You know, where something feels uncomfortable compared to, I truly feel like I will physically have something happen to me right this moment. Yeah. Okay. So we're saying trigger warning.
I'm going to say mild trigger warning. That's otherwise my book was a delight and a treat as well.
Yeah.
And I'm
great.
So bummed, you guys. I forgot to bring my darn book when I came up north.
So I feel like you get to go first this time.
It's my turn to go first.
Yeah.
So I read a Wallflower Christmas, which is part of the Wallflower series, which I had no experience or knowledge of prior to. I was originally going to read another Debbie Macomber, but if you listen to our last episode, I couldn't do it. One was enough.
Also, having just recently listened to our episodes previous, I'm glad we know how to pronounce that now.
Yes, Macomber.
Okay, continue.
So, A Wallflower Christmas is by Lisa Kleypas. Before we jump into that, she has a contemporary book titled Sugar Daddy, which I may have to put on my future reading list.
Oh, please do. I'm writing that down.
Sugar Daddy.
That's going in the notes.
The notes.
Yep.
So our lead male in this story is Rafe Bowman, who is a notorious rake. Rafe the Rake. He is the brother of two of the Wallflower characters. So Lillian and Daisy, he is their brother.
Okay.
And then I thought the female character was going to be Lady Natalie Blanford, but she's actually twist. It's a twist. She's not the lead lady. It is her cousin, Hannah, who is the lead lady. And I did not see that coming until quite a ways into the book.
Did the description of the book lead you to believe otherwise?
Yeah, it led me to believe that Lady Natalie was going to be the focus of the love and attention.
But no, it's Hannah.
It's Hannah, the cousin.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tell me about Hannah and the love story we got going.
Yeah. So cousin Hannah Appleton is poor, and she's essentially been taken in by Natalie's family.
Mm-hmm.
And she is maybe 1 or 2 years older than Natalie, and her chaperone of sorts, if you will. Kind of a maid as well in some ways, because she takes care of Natalie's hair and makeup and getting her dressed and ready and picking up after her. And yeah. So
all the things
a cousin does. No, if that's...
I mean, back in the day, you needed to prove your worth. So, I mean, I guess.
Sure. So the 4 Wallflower ladies, Annabelle, Daisy, Evie, and Lillian, they decide that to facilitate the matchmaking between Natalie and Rafe the Rake, that they're going to invite Hannah over for tea to get some inside scoops on Natalie, so that maybe Rafe can go in there and have some background of what she likes, what her interests are, so he can kind of win her over from the get-go, because he's American, so he's a little uncouth. He's got to build up his reputation and earn her love, so to speak.
It does make sense.
Yeah.
You talk to the friends and the family around them, be like, hey, a little intel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So Hannah does that. She shows up to tea. She meets Rafe. She's unimpressed. She does not dig him.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, you're uncouth. You're a dirty American. And there's an incident right off the bat where he accosts her on her way out from the tea. And this is what I was warning you about. He accosts her, and he kind of takes a little advantageous kiss. And she's like, no, get off me, dude. And he does it anyway. So this is the one thing that I did not enjoy. I did not like it. I guess they were trying to set up the whole he is a rake type of thing to prove that he's a rake. I don't know. I didn't like it. I didn't care for it. But she even goes and tells her cousin Natalie, he kissed me without permission. And Natalie thinks it's funny, which I think that will tell you what type of person Natalie is.
I don't know that I would appreciate a future spouse of mine trying to hit on my family members.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a little weird.
It's uncomfy.
Natalie thinks it's funny, and she's like, oh, I think I'll be into this guy. Which, so like, what? Where are you getting that from?
Lady, I mean, to each their own.
And Hannah's trying to tell Natalie and her uncle, like, hey, this dude, like, he's not okay. I'm not digging him. I don't like him. He's very forward. And she doesn't tell her uncle about the kiss. I think that would put her in an improper position in some way. I don't know. But she did tell her cousin, and her cousin's like, oh, haha, that's so funny. This will be great. So the game plan is that they're going to spend the holiday at one of the manors of one of the Wallflower girls. And they're going to foster the relationship between Natalie and Rafe. But that's not at all how it goes, obviously. Rafe continues to get to know Hannah better. She's a delightful person. She's not as showy or as beautiful as Natalie, but she's very down to earth. She doesn't like the frills. She's fine with living a moderate lifestyle, and that's okay. Educated, smart, intelligent, not afraid to speak her mind, which I greatly appreciate and enjoy. And she does fun things like read a Christmas carol to the children who are also staying at the manor, because it's several families who are coming together. And Rafe loves watching her read to the kids. He really enjoys it. And at first he was like, well, I have to get married. The pressure's on to carry on the family traditions and name and business. And my dad's kind of pushing for me to get married at this point, since his daughters are all married now. And so he was totally embracing the whole I got to get married thing, but it was all intended to be Lady Natalie. But now it's going to be Hannah. He knows in his mind, like, Hannah's the one for him.
Okay.
But there's some odd pressure from his dad because Hannah doesn't come from money. She's the poor relative.
Right.
So it's kind of a will they, won't they, until the very ending of the book, which I don't want to spoil because I did, aside from the weird, icky kissing assault thing, I did thoroughly enjoy the rest of it. And to Rafe's redeeming qualities, later on, as him and Hannah have these close encounters of various natures, he does start asking for permission and consent, and it's all about her choice and what she wants and if she's okay with things. So it's a complete turnaround of his rakish personality.
You know, you and I have had discussions before about people's ability to learn and grow.
Yes.
And I don't know that we give that kind of grace in today's society the way we should. And so it's nice to see a character redeemed by the end. So he has characteristics that we do not necessarily encourage or appreciate to begin with. But, you know, the fact that he can maybe learn and grow,
yeah,
I'm all here for it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to spoil it. Like I said, I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm trying to remember which book it was. Thanksgiving. My Thanksgiving book. They referred to her privates as sex.
Okay. We had this discussion and I wanted to be like, okay, her sex.
So
her lady bits. In your book now.
She does it again. And remember when we talked about Thanksgiving, I was like, I've never heard people refer to their hoo-ha as sex.
And I was like,
I've read 2 books.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I said, for me, that's such like an old school or more like clinical.
Yeah.
But I've definitely heard it. But I think it's really interesting that you've had it now 2 books in a row.
Yeah.
And like that it wasn't something you were familiar with. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
still don't like it.
I don't think you have to like it. Like I said, there are so many different ways to refer to it, but it's like, what is sexy compared to clinical, compared to funny?
Right.
Because again, like you just said, hoo-ha. The two of us are like, she got her hoo-ha out. Like, there's nothing sexy about that.
Right. I'm still looking for that perfect name to call it, Megan.
The appropriate word. Her womanhood.
Oh, God. Okay, so I also want to just do a little quick comparison and contrast.
Her moist fold.
Her moist folds. Megan, they referred to it as another thing.
Her hot mountain.
Right. They referred to it as another thing.
Her mound of pleasure.
No. Can't even say it now because you got me giggling. Okay. Blunt, silken peak.
Her blunt, silken peak. So favorite so far of anything we've blunt, silken peak.
Silken peak. Oh my God. Okay. So a little comparison and contrasting. In my previous Christmas book from episode 5, the Debbie Macumber 1225 Christmas Tree Lane. It all focuses in Cedar Cove, and you're supposed to, a myriad of characters that I do not give 2 craps about.
Right.
It was diverting multiple chapters away from it. And I mentioned this is apparently a series, a Wallflower. And what I loved and appreciated was there was 1.5 pages at the very beginning that just said, once upon a time, there were 4 friends who were wallflowers. They sat on the sidelines at various London society events, and they became fast friends. And this is the story of their brother. And you could surely read their previous stories. Annabelle came from a poor family, but she's the most stunning out of the 4. But you can see because she was poor, she was on the sidelines. Then there's Daisy and Lillian, who are Rafe's sisters, and they are rich Americans who, they wanted to make good matches, bring in titles for their up-and-coming American families. And then there's Evie, who is one of my favorites, honestly. She's a redhead. She has an inheritance coming, but it's from her father owning a club, and that is not deemed societal acceptance type of thing. But eventually she will. And what I loved about her is she's just a sweetie, and she's shy, and she has this stammer. So she has a speech impediment, which you don't often see in romance novels.
No.
And she's a main character in one of the other Wallflower books. And I enjoyed this read so much, and I appreciated that she just touched on the characters as needed, and it was appropriate, and it didn't divert from the story. And I would 100% probably read the whole Wallflower series.
I would be interested specifically in the one where we're talking about the speech path issue, because I do think you're right. We don't get a lot of that kind of information or coverage of people who have those issues. And that is so common.
Yes.
That's so common.
Yes.
You know, like having somebody with a stutter, having somebody with hearing loss, having a person who has a speech path issue. That would be a really lovely way to cover this.
Yeah. And all 4 of these girls are lovely. They're all down to earth. Some of them are sassy. Some of them are shy. You kind of get why they're friends.
Yeah.
And it's just like real life friends. You know, they complement each other's strengths. They build each other up. They encourage each other. And so they play this little matchmaking for their brother and Hannah. And even they saw that Hannah was the one and not Natalie.
But you didn't have to read the other novels to feel as though you could really understand this one.
Exactly. Which was not the case with the Cedar Cove 1225 Christmas Tree Lane. I felt like, who the fuck are these people? Why are we spending chapters on them? And who gives a shit?
Mm-hmm.
They're getting a puppy. Oh, great. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to her credit, Miss McCumber, if you had read all the other ones, maybe this would be fun and exciting to see it. But I do appreciate if you're in the middle of a series being able to feel connected even if you haven't read the other books, which truly the book I'm about to talk about.
Yeah, we talked about it in the last episode too. I did not feel drawn into Cedar Cove. Yeah, I was not connecting with anything. It was frankly an annoyance, and I had zero and still have zero desire to read any more Cedar Cove. With the Wallflowers, I'm like, yeah, I could totally get into this series. I also think that people who have been into Bridgerton would thoroughly enjoy this. It's got a lot of Bridgerton vibes in kind of the story and the setup and the multiple different relationships in a series of books, and it's set in the Regency type era. So I really think a lot of Bridgerton fans could totally enjoy the Wallflower series.
It sounds like it, for sure. It sounds like something I would really enjoy.
Yeah.
So glad to have that in our repertoire.
Yes. And I would give this a habanero. There's some steamy. Remember I said I wanted a steamy Christmas story?
You did.
I got it. No. Well, I mean, when you have, what are we calling this? Blunt silken peaks? How could it not be habanero?
I'm sorry, not blunt silken. It's Hills of Hedonism. I wrote it down to make sure I had it.
So tell me about your book. Is your book a habanero? Where's your book at?
No, I would still give mine a jalapeno. So my book is called A Charming Christmas Arrangement by Heatherly Bell. Guys, I loved the writing. I really did. This was the most self-aware book I have read. It made me laugh. I thought it was the appropriate amount of steamy and good relationship stuff. So yeah, a lot of good stuff to appreciate in this book. The premise of my book is that our main characters, we've got Stacy, we've got Adam. Stacy is a writer, and she had gone to Wyoming to separate herself from her mother. They'd had a very enmeshed relationship, very dependent on each other. And she went out to Wyoming to try and write some more of her novels without the influence of her mom. Met Adam at a bar. She had just been going there to read her books and write, whatever, but the two of them really hit it off on one very specific night. You and I have discussed this communication issue multiple times.
Yes, on various episodes.
People
can never communicate. What is your deal?
Seriously. Communication, you guys. That is it. Like, if we go to romantic reminders over and over again, communication, please.
Yeah, it's huge.
Because this entire book could have been saved chapters and chapters had they just communicated to begin with. So, like, the big premise is they have this one-night stand that probably wouldn't have been a one-night stand.
Ah.
Yeah. So
if they had communicated.
Correct. So they have this really
concept.
Oh, they have this really passionate, beautiful night. They wake up. Well, not they. She wakes up the next morning. Stacy wakes up and sees a picture of Adam and his wife.
Oh,
Yeah. So they've had this passionate evening. She thought this was beautiful. She thought this was the start of a relationship. And instead, she just sees this picture of him and his bride. And instead of saying, hey, man, what the heck? She writes him a note that says, this was fun. Don't contact me again.
honestly, I mean, communication is great. I probably would have been a big enough bitch. I would have been like, dude, what the fuck? Like, you're married. But I also get the immediate desire to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. So she gets the hell out. So that should have been the end, except that she finds out she's pregnant.
Just a brief question before we proceed.
Yeah.
In Stuffed, my Thanksgiving story.
Yeah.
Condom use.
Yeah.
Was there any discussion of condom use in your book?
No, ma'am. There wasn't.
Shocking.
Yeah, shocking. Although, like I said, this was treated tastefully.
Sure.
You know. So the entire beginning of the book is just her saying, like, this was not part of my plan, but I've decided to embrace it. I'm going to go forward with this. I've decided to keep my child. And maybe I should let him know, but regardless, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
So she runs off to the farm where he was a farmhand. He's not there anymore. They basically tell her, yeah, he left like 2 months ago. We don't know where he's at. She's pretty sure he's going to be a shit dad because he seemed to have possibly some PTSD issues. She knows he's a former soldier. And so she's kind of not really wanting to let him know. So she's pretending to do the right thing by like, yeah, I'll try and find him and let him know. But she's really hoping to not find him. She wants to move home to Chicago. She and her mom are going to raise this baby. It's going to be fine. However, one of my favorite things about this entire book was her friend in Wyoming, her other cohort, is also a writer. So Stacy had moved out there to write. Her friend is a writer. Her friend is a romance novel writer. Folks, this is the most self-aware thing I've ever seen. This book and its treatment of writers and romance writers. Heatherly Bell, thank you. This was hilarious. I loved it. I loved how it was treated. So her romance writer friend is like, oh, you can't find him at his little farm? I'll find him for you. Tracks him down to Texas. They go to Texas. Anyway, basically it comes down to he's a former soldier. He's got great insurance. She's a writer. She doesn't have great insurance. And he says, let's just get pretend married. So we're going to get married in order for you to have insurance for my baby.
Having a baby is not
expensive, right? And so she agrees because she's practical and she's thoughtful. I really like this story. I will not spoil a single thing because I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I thought the writing was good. I thought the premise was decent. I thought relationship building was great because it wasn't just 2 or 3 days. And there were a lot of things to really like about this book. When I say that this author was self-aware, they talked about Hallmark movies and the cheesiness of Hallmark movies.
Yes.
They had a lot of references. Here, let me see if I can find some of them. They were talking about the fact that our main character, Stacy, was an author of these kind of like dark novels. Her friend came up and said, well, gosh, there's no way you could ever write romance. You lack imagination. I was like, that's great. I love that. Like a romance novelist actually like talking about the different things that happen with romance novels.
Right.
Yeah. Also, you and I have discussed the fact that I don't know how to bite my lip. Ladies, do you know how to bite your lip properly?
And make it look cute.
Do you? Do you know how to do?
No, because I have very prominent front teeth. And so I just look like a chipmunk or a beaver when I
did it. Like you read it in books and they're like, oh, and she bit her lip seductively.
Right.
I do not ever.
Did they say that in that book?
They don't. But here's what I'm getting to. Okay, so my husband and I have joked about the fact that, like, you talk about, like, women biting their lip, and I'm like, that's not real. Nobody does that. And then I discovered people do it. It's just that I am completely inept at it.
Yeah.
So, bite your lip seductively. And I'm like,
right.
I can't do it. I don't understand how a human does it. So in this book, when I said self-aware, It's so funny. So here we go. She's discussing whether or not she should try and make herself look cute. And she says, should she pucker her lips, or would she get that sad duck face look if she did?
I like it.
It's that. Like somebody who is completely aware that some women just can't.
Right.
Just can't do it.
Some women are cute criers and some women are ugly criers. Yeah.
I'm not a cute crier.
Oh, God. I'm a snot crier for sure.
I just get puffy.
Yeah. Puffy, blotchy, red, snotty. That's me. Yep.
I'm a puffy crier. But in general, this book had so many things I enjoyed. There was a lot of humor. There's a local book club that is mostly of people who are in their 70s and 80s, and they read a romantic, sexy poem for the couple when they're getting married, and I laughed out loud. And that does not happen frequently where I legitimately laugh out loud.
Yeah.
But it was great. They bring in a lot of really good modern day things. And I just feel like this is the kind of book that I wish more writers could really ascribe to. There's so much. And the fact that there were the issues with mental health. We were talking about PTSD.
Okay.
The enmeshment of different relationships and
creating healthy boundaries, probably.
Yeah, creating healthy boundaries was a really big deal. Consent was a big deal. At one point in time, they were talking about pregnancy hormones and talking about how you felt your brain wasn't working anymore.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. Stacy, the main character, said something about he was manly in his manhood, and then follows it up by saying, oh my God, clearly my brain's not working anymore because I can't even form real sentences.
Manly in his man. Okay.
Exactly. And then there were a lot of really good quotes. And if you don't mind,
yeah, give me some.
I will find some good quotes. So I've got page 87. In her experience, she understood that separation and divorce, and maybe even death, didn't mean the end of love.
Oh,
I thought that was really nice.
Okay.
That seemed really good. We've got a lot of really respectful bits and pieces where I've got the different ways we feel throughout our life when we are feeling thin, when we're feeling heavy, when we're feeling tired, when we're feeling overwhelmed, we're feeling pregnant, all these things where you don't necessarily feel super sexy.
Yes.
There were parts in the book where I really appreciated the fact that the man, Adam, looked at Stacy, and when she was not feeling her best, he was basically yeah, even right now, I really want you.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was really, really quite nice because she was feeling very unwantable.
Sure.
Being, 5, 6, 7 months pregnant.
Largy and
feeling
pregnant.
icky. and she's like, God, nobody wants me now. And he was like, okay, maybe it's weird, but I really do.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was really sweet
Yeah.
too, because it's not necessarily about how our outsides appear. It's
Sure.
who we are.
Yeah.
And in that vein, one of the lines was, it was enough that he wanted her physically, but he felt like he could grow to love her someday, love and have the companionship and respect.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So in general, there was so much.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So I know you don't want to give away and spoil things.
Yeah.
During the course of the book, does baby arrive or no?
Kind of. Yeah. I would say in like maybe the last 2 pages.
Okay.
Yeah. And you get a lovely name for the baby.
Okay.
That is hearkening back to a very early interaction that the two of them had.
Okay.
Which I really liked. And her mom, who she has the difficult relationship with, questions the name. And she puts up her boundaries and says, no, that's going to be the name. This is the name.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really lovely name.
Okay.
Yeah, I really like it. And to go back to when you were talking about like kind of interesting words for genitalia, it's not necessarily genitalia, but at some point in time, she says something about her body parts thrum and ache.
Ooh, thrumming and aching.
I know. I'm like, ooh, those
thrumming.
Thrum. I'm like, those are nice words. We don't hear about body parts thrumming very frequently.
But was her blunt silken peak thrumming?
She didn't talk about her blunt silken peak. I did hear multiple times about how it was the kinkiest night they'd ever had. So yeah, the thrumming and aching I thought was those were great words. In general, I also have to say this entire book wouldn't have happened had these two communicated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Remember if we
or used a condom.
Yeah. But in general, it was one of those things where they both had relationship trauma from the past.
As do we all.
Exactly. And instead of actually hitting it head on and saying, hey, this is a thing that really bothers me, they just let it, be out there in the ether. And that caused a lot of problems.
Okay.
Her past, one of the things that made me laugh really, really hard was she had some, it sounds bad to say I laughed at her trauma. That's not what it was. She had some trauma with a former fiance where she caught him cheating on her kitchen table.
Okay.
But the entire scene was just her focusing on the fact that she would have to replace the kitchen table.
I suppose, because she wouldn't. Yeah, okay.
No. And as I was reading it, it was like 2 to 3 pages of her being like, I need a new kitchen table. What antique store do I go to get a kitchen table to replace my favorite kitchen table?
Yeah.
And at one point in time, her ex was like, stop focusing on the kitchen table. And she's like, but that's the problem. And I don't feel like I've related to somebody more. Point where I'm like, clearly the kitchen table is the problem.
Right.
So there were a lot of really silly things like that where I felt drawn in because it's the irrational parts of our brain.
Right.
That really I relate to.
Yeah.
So yeah, guys, I loved this. And I think you would love it too. And I'm going to try not to tell you too much, but
yeah, and I really loved mine as well. And like I said, I'm actually interested in reading the rest of the Wallflower books. At least one more for sure.
I would read more from this series. And I didn't feel like I had to have read more from this series for this to make sense. But this is apparently the 3rd book in the Charming series. Okay. So it's about Charming, Texas and that area. But it was very good on its own, independent. So
nice.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious, too, if Heatherly Bell has written anything besides the Charming series.
Yeah, actually.
Like Sugar Daddy or...
I think there's a list somewhere here in the back, but I was just so excited to have a book that really made me happy. I stayed up until 3:30 in the morning reading this book. I started it and realized that I was actually super enjoying it and just didn't stop. Yeah. And so I really did like this book. You'll love these other uplifting titles from Heatherly Bell. Ready?
Yeah, give it to me.
The Charming Checklist. Winning Mr. Charming. Grand Prize Cowboy. More Than One Night. Reluctant Hometown Hero. And The Right Moment. And they're all Harlequins. So
okay,
I know. Good.
All right. It's time for my favorite part. The booby prize. Booby prize.
Booby prize.
Booby prize. Okay. Page number for you, my dear.
Okay. I dog-eared it. I'm page 30.
Ooh. Okay. Give me the quote.
Okay. My quote is, the weight was all in her belly and somehow in her breasts, which strained against her long-sleeved sweater.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So not quite overtly sexual, just reference.
Discussing her body because she was carrying weight in a different way.
Yeah.
Although it follows by saying, he recalled she had him, the weight was all in her belly and somehow in her breasts, which strained against her long-sleeved sweater. He recalled she had an amazing set, but now they were decidedly larger.
That happens.
You know?
All right.
Okay.
Mine was page 21.
You get me every time.
Poor Debbie McCumber never had a single breast reference in the entire day.
Yeah. I feel like, okay, wait, if Debbie McCumber didn't have one, I think I also won on my Nashville books.
I believe you did. Yes.
Okay, I've got two. You've got the pitch. Continue.
Like I said, unfortunately forgot the book. I can't believe I did that. I could have sworn I made a point of putting it in my bag, and maybe I'll find it in one of my bags when I get home and did remember it.
Yeah.
I don't have the quote with me, unfortunately, but I did write down in my notes that it was page 21.
Mm-hmm.
Romantic reminders, Megan.
Yeah, my romantic reminder, one of the big parts of my book is that they've decided to get married because of insurance.
Sure.
Because she's pregnant, they're going to try and figure this out, and they're going to get married. They assume they'll get divorced pretty quick after the baby is born because it's just to make sure the baby has like its prenatal care. But while she is hanging out there, waiting for all this stuff to happen, he makes her breakfast every single morning, and it is it's incredibly sweet because he's really trying to take care of her and the baby, and he is catering to what he knows she really enjoys. And so I really enjoyed the fact that, again, you and I talk about food in a lot of these, but it does seem like when he serves somebody the food that they really enjoy, it is love. So he gave her breakfast and, not necessarily in bed, but she always had breakfast waiting for her in the morning.
That's very sweet.
I thought that was lovely.
I would totally fall in love with a guy that made me breakfast every morning. Yeah. I mean, as long as it wasn't shitty breakfast.
No, it sounded... Well, he had moved down to Charming, Texas to be a cook. Guys, there's so much I'm leaving out.
Yeah.
You need to read this book. Yeah.
So my romantic reminder, I really enjoyed that every Christmas Eve, Rafe writes a letter and leaves it on her pillow.
Oh, that is sweet.
So I just love that it's a way to communicate even further and foster that intimacy in a relationship and have a nice little annual Christmas tradition.
I like that.
And I actually liked it so much, I think I might start doing that with Bob and leave him a little Christmas note on his pillow.
I do like that. That's really sweet.
I like a love note.
Follow it with a breakfast morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Breakfast in bed.
Big bowl of oatmeal.
Merry Christmas. So this was your favorite book out of our inaugural season.
Yes.
My favorite book, I still think, even though I thoroughly enjoyed the Wallflower book, I still love Stuffed.
Yeah. I even listening back and doing some editing on our transcript, you could hear how much you enjoyed that book.
Yeah.
And I felt compelled to maybe want to read more from that author.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost the same connection that you're having with this current book.
Mm-hmm.
It was a down-to-earth scenario. It was filled with lovely, light, realistic humor. It was just so realistic and ticked so many boxes for me that I felt related. I felt the character was very relatable.
Yeah.
And I felt the whole plot and storyline was completely realistic. And I certainly appreciate fantasy and a historical romance. But there's also something to be said for these contemporary romances where you really feel connected to the characters and it's very realistic.
I feel like really in all of my notes here, the biggest category I wrote was relatable.
Yeah.
That was the title of my list.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's so much to be said about putting yourself in that space and feeling like you could be that character. You have the escapism of reading this book and being in a different space, but you still want to be able to feel like it could be you.
Yeah.
That this could be you. But that was a new category for me in my notes, was actually writing an entire list of things that felt relatable. And I think you're right. I think that's why these books feel more important, or not necessarily important, but more, I don't even know the word. Like there's something about them that makes them better.
Appealing.
Thank you. There's the word. I'm like, he's escaping me right now. Stop it.
Well, Thanksgiving food and yeah.
Oh, you guys, there was so much good Thanksgiving food. I have a plate of leftover Thanksgiving food in the fridge.
Lucky you.
Sure.
Speaking of breakfast, I'm going to eat Thanksgiving food for breakfast in the morning. So this is our last episode of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a whole bunch of books coming up on the pipeline.
Oh, so many books.
I will say in January, we are going to be doing kind of a recap of 2024. Yeah. Highlights, bloopers, all kinds of fun stuff like that.
Yep.
So look for that in January, friends. And then coming up in February, we're already picking out a President's Day romance.
Okay. It was challenged. Okay, we were talking about February is really good for Valentine's Day. I feel like President's Day. There's so many Valentine's Day. And she's like, President's Day. I'm like, oh, I can find a President's Day romance. She's like, no, you can't. I'm like, challenge accepted.
And you found one.
I did. I found one. So we have a President's Day romance novel coming up.
Yeah.
And also you wanted to go for like an Scottish thing.
Yeah.
So we do have kilts.
Kilts coming.
Yeah. So I will have my President's Day romance and kilts a coming.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll kick us off great for the new year.
Yes.
If there are things, dear audience members, that you would like to see happen in 2025 for the podcast, you want us to have a special segment within the show where you have some fun ideas for us, we are always receptive to fun and new ideas.
Yes.
Would love to hear them from you. Feel free to email us at romanceontherockspodcast@gmail.com or comment in our shows on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, what have you.
Wherever you're watching, YouTube, and
message us on Instagram.
Yeah.
And the things. Yeah.
No. Just come say hi.
Mm-hmm.
We love y'all and we want your feedback, and we're looking forward to getting to know you better and maybe reading some of the novels that you have recommended and thrown our direction. Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you for joining us for our final episode of 2024.
Yes, it's been great. Give us a review if you are also a bookish biddy like us and love your romance novels. And just remember that we love you.
A Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year.